need to tell you about the Denninger case. It's been eating at me for years now. I was the lead investigator on what should have been a simple missing persons case. A husband and wife went hiking in the mountains of northern Oregon. They never came back. What we found changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in our forest. The call came in on a Tuesday morning in October 2018. The Denninger family had been expecting their son and daughter-in-law back from a weekend hiking trip. When Monday came and went with no word, they knew something was wrong. The couple were experienced hikers. They always stuck to their plans. They always called when they were supposed to. The family had tried calling their cell phones repeatedly. No answer. They contacted the ranger station at Cascade Mountain Trail. No one had seen the couple check out. Their planned return was Sunday evening. By Monday night, the family was panicking. The family filed the missing persons report that morning. Standard procedure was to wait 48 hours, but the weather forecast showed a storm coming. We had to move fast. I assembled a search team and headed up to Cascade Mountain Trail where the couple had planned to hike. The missing persons report gave us basic information. The husband was 34 years old, software engineer from Portland. The wife was 31st, elementary school teacher. They had been married for 6 years, no children. Both were experienced hikers who had completed sections of the Pacific Crest Trail. This was supposed to be a simple weekend trip to celebrate their wedding anniversary. The first day of searching turned up nothing, no sign of the couple anywhere along the main trail. Their car was still parked at the trailhead. All their camping gear was gone. It looked like they had started their hike as planned, but vanished somewhere in the woods. We interviewed other hikers who'd been on the trail that weekend. A few people remembered seeing a couple matching their description on Saturday morning. They had seemed happy and well prepared. Nothing unusual about their behavior or equipment. The trail they had planned to follow was well marked and heavily used. It led to a scenic overlook about 5 miles from the parking area. Most day hikers turn around there. But the couple had planned to continue another 3 miles to a backcountry campsite. That's where we focused our initial search efforts. On the second day, we expanded the search area. That's when we found the first piece of evidence. A backpack about 3 miles off the main trail. It was torn and scattered. Personal items were spread across a 50-foot radius. Water bottles, energy bars, a broken compass. Everything looked like it had been thrown around in a panic. The backpack belonged to the husband. His driver's license was still in the wallet inside, but there was no sign of him anywhere nearby. The surrounding area showed signs of a struggle, broken branches, disturbed undergrowth. Something had definitely happened here. We brought in additional search teams, K-9 units, a helicopter for aerial reconnaissance. The dogs picked up a scent trail leading away from where we found the backpack. It headed deeper into the forest in a direction that made no sense for lost hikers. The scent trail was confusing. The dogs would follow it for a few hundred yards, then lose it completely, then pick it up again in a different location, like whatever they were tracking had doubled back multiple times or been carried. We found pieces of torn fabric caught on thorns and branches. The colors matched the clothing description we had from the family. There were small bloodstains on some of the pieces, not enough to suggest serious injury, but enough to show they had been moving through thick brush in a hurry. The terrain in this area was much more difficult than the main hiking trail. Steep slopes, dense undergrowth, rocky areas that would be dangerous to navigate even in daylight. No experienced hiker would choose to go this way voluntarily. The real breakthrough came on day 3. One of the search team members noticed a trail camera mounted high in a tree about 100 yards from where we found the backpack. The camera belonged to a local hunter who had placed it there to monitor deer movement. We retrieved the memory card and took it back to the station. The camera had been recording for 3 weeks. Most of the footage was just deer and other wildlife moving through the area. But then we found the clip that changed everything. What we saw on that footage still haunts me to this day. The timestamp showed Saturday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. The couple appeared walking along a game trail that connected to the main hiking path. They looked happy and relaxed. The husband was pointing at something in the trees. The wife was taking photos with her phone. Just a normal couple enjoying a hike in the mountains. They stopped to rest near a fallen log. The wife sat down and pulled out a water bottle. The husband was checking his GPS device. Everything looked completely normal. Then at 2:52 p.m., everything changed. The footage showed the couple stopping suddenly. They both turned to look at something off camera to their left. The husband stepped in front of his wife in a protective stance. You could see the fear in their body language even from the distance of the camera. The wife grabbed her husband's arm. They both started backing away slowly. Then at 2:53 p.m., we saw what had frightened them. A massive figure emerged from the trees behind them. At first glance, it looked like a person in dark clothing. But as it got closer, the truth became clear. This was no human being. The creature stood at least 8 feet tall. It was covered in thick brown fur. Its arms hung almost to its knees. The way it moved was unlike anything I had ever seen. Part human, part animal, but something else entirely. The creature didn't approach directly. It moved from tree to tree, staying partially concealed, like it was studying them. The couple started backing away faster. The creature followed at a distance, matching their pace but not closing the gap. At 2:54 p.m., the husband grabbed his wife's hand and they started to run. The camera angle captured them disappearing into the thick forest. The creature followed about 10 seconds later. It moved through the trees with incredible speed and agility, like it knew exactly where it was going. The last clear image was at 2:55 p.m. The creature pausing at the edge of the camera's view. It turned and looked directly at the camera for about 3 seconds, like it knew it was being recorded. Then it disappeared into the forest. We watched that 5-minute clip dozens of times, enhanced the image quality as much as possible, brought in wildlife experts to analyze what we were seeing. Everyone agreed it wasn't a bear or any other known animal. The creature's proportions were all wrong for a human in a costume. The arm length, the width of the shoulders, the way it moved through the trees, no person could fake that kind of natural forest movement. The most disturbing part was the intelligence it displayed. The way it had approached the couple, staying hidden at first, then revealing itself gradually, like it was testing their reaction. When they ran, it didn't chase immediately. It waited, like it knew it could catch them whenever it wanted. We timed the sequence. From first sighting to when everyone disappeared into the forest was less than 3 minutes. But you could see the creature had been watching them for longer, probably since they first entered the area. After seeing the footage, we knew we were dealing with something far more serious than a simple hiking accident. We expanded the search team and brought in specialists, trackers, wildlife experts, even a few people who claimed to have experience with unusual animal encounters. Following the trail from the camera location, we found more evidence. Footprints in the soft earth that were unlike anything in the textbooks. They were human-shaped but massive, nearly 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. The depth of the impression suggested something weighing over 600 pounds. The stride length between prints was over 6 feet, much longer than any human could manage. The tracks showed 5 distinct toes with what looked like claw marks at the tips, but the overall shape was definitely humanoid. We made plaster casts of the best footprints, took detailed photographs from multiple angles, measured everything precisely. The evidence was undeniable. Something large and bipedal had been moving through this area. The tracking expert we brought in had 30 years of experience. He had never seen anything like these prints. He confirmed they were fresh, made within hours of when we found them. Whatever had made them was probably still in the area. We found a second backpack about half a mile deeper into the forest. This one belonged to the wife. It was even more damaged than the first. The straps had been torn completely off. There were what looked like claw marks in the fabric, deep gouges that went through multiple layers of material. Inside the backpack, we found her phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. The last photos she had taken were from the morning of their hike. Happy pictures of the couple at the trailhead, nothing that suggested they knew what was coming. Her phone showed she had tried to make emergency calls, multiple attempts to reach 911, but there was no cell service in that area. The last call attempt was time-stamped at 3:17 p.m. About 20 minutes after the creature had first appeared on the trail camera. We also found her GPS device. It had been recording their route automatically. The track showed they had followed the main trail for the first 3 miles, then suddenly veered off into the forest. The GPS track became erratic after that, like they had been running in different directions, sometimes doubling back, sometimes going in circles. The last GPS ping was at 4:23 p.m., almost an hour and a half after the first sighting. The location was over 2 miles from where we found her backpack, in an area so remote that most of our search team had never been there. The strangest discovery was the markings on the trees, deep gouges in the bark about 8 feet off the ground. They looked like they had been made by fingernails or claws. Some were fresh, others looked much older, like this area had been marked as territory for a long time. The pattern of markings was consistent, always at the same height, always on trees that were visible from game trails, like warning signs to other animals, or markers showing the boundaries of claimed territory. We found these markings over a wide area. At least 5 square miles of forest showed signs of being regularly marked. Some of the older markings were almost grown over, suggesting this behavior had been going on for years. The wildlife expert we consulted had never seen anything like it. Bears will mark trees, but not in this pattern, not at this height, and never with this level of consistency across such a large area. We also found what looked like deliberately broken branches, large limbs snapped off trees at heights that would require incredible strength. The breaks were clean, not the jagged tears you see from storm damage, like something had grabbed the branches and twisted them off. As the days went on and we searched deeper into the forest, I started to notice something. Every member of the search team mentioned the same thing. The feeling that we were being watched. The woods were too quiet. No bird sounds, no small animals rustling in the underbrush. Just an oppressive silence that made everyone nervous. I had been in these mountains many times over the years. This felt different, wrong somehow. Several times I caught glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, large dark shapes moving between the trees in the distance. But whenever I turned to look directly, nothing was there. The search dogs were acting strange too. They would follow a scent trail for a while, then suddenly stop and refuse to go further. They would whine and try to pull back toward the main trail. Even the most experienced tracking dogs seemed spooked by something in those woods. One of the canine handlers mentioned that his dog had been acting nervous since we entered the area. The dog kept looking up into the trees, like it was tracking something moving through the canopy. But there was never anything visible when we looked. The helicopter pilot reported similar strange observations. He said the forest looked normal from above, but something felt off. He couldn't explain what it was. Just an instinct that they were flying over an area where they weren't welcome. On the 5th day of searching, we found pieces of torn clothing caught on thorns and branches. The fabric matched the description of what the couple had been wearing. There were small bloodstains on some of the pieces. Not enough to suggest serious injury, but enough to show they had been moving through thick brush in a panic. The distribution of the clothing pieces told a story. They formed a rough trail leading deeper into the most remote part of the forest. But it wasn't a straight line. The pieces zigzagged back and forth, like the people wearing the clothes had been running in terror, changing direction frequently. Some pieces were hung high on branches, 8 or 9 feet off the ground. No running person could have left them there, like something had been carrying the clothes and dropping pieces as it moved through the trees. The blood on the fabric was tested. It matched the blood types of both missing hikers. But the amount was minimal, consistent with minor cuts from thorns and branches. Not the massive blood loss you would expect from a fatal attack. The trail of evidence led us deeper into a remote section of the forest that most hikers never saw. The terrain was rough and difficult to navigate, perfect hiding spots everywhere, caves and rocky overhangs that could conceal almost anything. In one particularly secluded area, we found what appeared to be a makeshift shelter, branches and logs arranged in a way that provided cover from above. The construction was crude but effective, large enough for something the size of what we had seen on the camera footage. The shelter was clearly not built by humans. The materials were too large. Some of the logs would have required several people to move, but they had been positioned with precision, like whatever built it understood basic engineering principles. Around the shelter, we found more evidence of long-term habitation, worn paths through the undergrowth, areas where the forest floor had been cleared of debris. What looked like food storage areas built into rock crevices. Near the shelter, we found bones, animal bones mostly, deer, elk, maybe a few smaller animals. They had been stripped clean, and some showed signs of being broken open, like something had been extracting the marrow. The bones were scattered around what looked like a fire pit, but there were no burn marks, no ash, like the food had been consumed raw. The forensics team examined the bones carefully. The break patterns were consistent with incredible bite strength, much stronger than any known predator in the region. Some of the larger bones had been cracked open with what looked like stone tools. By the end of the first week, the entire search team was on edge. People were reporting strange sounds at night, heavy footsteps moving around the perimeter of our base camp, branches breaking in the distance. But whenever we investigated with flashlights, we found nothing. One search team member claimed he had seen glowing eyes watching him from the tree line, about 8 feet off the ground. When he called out to the rest of his team, the eyes disappeared, but he swore something large had been standing there. The camp cook reported that food had been going missing, not eaten, just taken. Entire containers of supplies would vanish overnight. We assumed it was bears at first, but bears don't carefully remove food from sealed containers without damaging the packaging. Several team members reported finding large handprints on their vehicles in the morning, muddy prints on windows and doors, always too big to be human. The prints showed long fingers with what looked like claws at the tips. By the end of the first week, the story had started to leak to the media. Reporters were calling about the missing couple. Questions were being asked about what we had found in the forest. My superiors were getting nervous about the attention. A local newspaper ran a story about the unusual search operation. They mentioned the large number of specialists we had brought in, the extended timeline, the focus on such a remote area. People were starting to ask why a simple missing persons case required so many resources. Social media posts from family members of search team personnel were drawing attention. Pictures of the base camp, comments about strange discoveries in the forest. The story was gaining momentum online. I was called into the chief's office and told to wrap up the search. The official line was that this was likely a bear attack. The couple had probably surprised a bear and been killed. Their bodies would turn up eventually when other hikers found them or when spring came and the snow melted. I tried to explain about the footage, the footprints, all the evidence that pointed to something else entirely. But no one wanted to hear it. The last thing the department needed was stories about monsters in the woods. Tourism would suffer, people would panic. It was better to keep things simple and quiet. The trail camera footage was locked away in evidence storage. The case file was marked as closed pending recovery of the bodies. The search was officially called off after 10 days. I was reassigned to other cases and told not to discuss the Deniger investigation with anyone. All the physical evidence we had collected was similarly restricted. The plaster casts of the footprints, the photographs of tree markings, the damaged backpacks, everything that might support an alternative explanation for what had happened. The wildlife experts we had consulted were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements. The tracking specialist was told his services were no longer needed. The helicopter pilot was transferred to a different region. Everyone who had seen the evidence was separated or silenced. The official report classified the disappearance as a probable animal attack. The case was handed over to the state wildlife department for follow-up, but no follow-up investigation was ever conducted. But I couldn't let it go. This wasn't just some animal attack. 2 people were dead, and whatever killed them was still out there. During my off time, I started going back to the forest alone, unofficial searches, trying to find more evidence. I purchased my own trail cameras and motion sensors, professional-grade night vision equipment, audio recording devices that could pick up sounds from long distances. I was determined to document whatever was living in those woods. Each time I went back, the feeling of being watched got stronger. I started carrying extra equipment, emergency GPS beacons, satellite communicators, anything that might help me survive if I encountered the same thing that had killed the Deniger couple. My first few solo trips were careful reconnaissance missions. I stayed close to the main trails, set up cameras near areas where we had found evidence, tried to establish patterns of movement and behavior. The cameras captured some interesting footage. Large shapes moving through the forest at night, always at the edge of the camera's range. Never clear enough to make definitive identification, but clearly something much larger than any known wildlife in the area. On my 3rd solo trip, I saw something that confirmed my worst fears. I was setting up a motion camera near where we had found the shelter when I caught movement in the distance. Through the trees, I could make out a large, dark figure. It was standing perfectly still about 200 yards away, watching me. The figure was massive, taller than any human, covered in dark fur or hair. It stood upright like a person, but the proportions were all wrong. The arms too long, the shoulders too broad, the head too small for the body size. I tried to get closer, but moving quietly through the thick underbrush was impossible. Every step I took seemed to echo through the forest. By the time I reached the spot where I had seen the figure, there was nothing there, just those same massive footprints in the soft earth. The tracks showed it had been standing in that exact spot for some time, long enough to leave deep impressions, long enough to watch everything I was doing. The footprints led away into the thickest part of the forest where following would be impossible. But what disturbed me most was the realization that it had allowed me to see it. The creature could have stayed hidden, but it chose to reveal itself, like it was sending a message, warning me that I was being watched. Over the next few months, I made several more trips to the area. Each time I found more evidence, more tracks, more markings on trees, more signs that something large and intelligent was living in that remote section of forest. But I also started to understand just how dangerous my solo trips were becoming. Whatever was out there knew I was coming back. It was learning my patterns, getting bolder about showing itself. I found evidence that it had been investigating my equipment. Cameras moved from their original positions, motion sensors knocked over, audio recorders with claw marks in the metal casing. Like the creature was studying human technology. Several times I found evidence that it had been near my truck while I was deeper in the woods. Scratches in the paint that looked like claw marks, handprints on the windows that were too large to be human, mud on the door handles, from fingers much longer than any person could have. The most disturbing discovery was finding my own equipment rearranged. Trail cameras moved to different trees, pointed back toward areas where I had been working, like the creature was using my own surveillance tools to watch me. The breaking point came on my last solo trip. I was hiking back to the truck just before dark when I heard movement in the trees around me. Not just one set of footsteps, multiple creatures moving through the forest, staying just out of sight but close enough that I could hear them. The sounds were coordinated, like a pack hunting together. One set of footsteps would stop while another continued. They were taking turns moving, never all at once, always maintaining position around me while staying hidden. I tried to stay calm and keep walking, but the sounds were getting closer, branches breaking, heavy footsteps on both sides of the trail, the steady crack of twigs under enormous weight. Something was definitely following me. I started to run. Behind me, I could hear what sounded like pursuit. Multiple large animals crashing through the undergrowth, but also something else. A sound like communication. Low-pitched calls back and forth between different positions in the forest. The pursuit lasted for almost a mile. I could hear them keeping pace through the trees, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind, like they were herding me toward a specific location. I didn't stop running until I reached the truck. I made it to the truck and locked the doors, sat there for almost an hour before I felt safe enough to drive away. In the rearview mirror, I could see dark shapes at the edge of the forest, multiple figures standing just inside the tree line, watching me leave. When I tried to report what I'd experienced on my solo trips, I was told to stop immediately. Any further unauthorized investigation would result in suspension. The case was closed. The official ruling was death by animal attack. End of story. I was transferred to a different department, put on desk duty reviewing old case files, kept as far away from active investigations as possible. The message was clear: keep quiet about what I had seen or find a new job. The trail camera footage disappeared from evidence storage. When I asked about it, I was told there had been a computer malfunction. The files were corrupted and unrecoverable. All physical evidence from the scene was similarly lost or misplaced. But I know what I saw. I know what killed the Deniger couple, and I know it's still out there. After months of investigation, I came to some disturbing conclusions about what we were dealing with. These weren't just animals acting on instinct. These creatures were intelligent. They understood human behavior well enough to stalk and hunt people. They knew how to avoid detection, how to eliminate evidence, how to stay hidden while watching potential threats. The markings on the trees weren't random. They were territorial markers, warnings to other creatures to stay away. The shelter we found wasn't temporary. It was part of a larger network of hiding spots throughout that section of forest. Most disturbing of all was the realization that this wasn't a recent development. The older tree markings suggested these creatures had been living in the area for years, maybe decades. The Deniger couple weren't the first victims. They were just the first ones where we found enough evidence to piece together what had happened. The intelligence they displayed was truly frightening. The way they had stalked me during my solo investigations, learning my patterns, using my own equipment against me. They understood human technology well enough to manipulate it. The incident where I was followed by multiple creatures revealed something even more disturbing. These things hunted in groups. They coordinated their movements, communicated with each other during the hunt. This wasn't just one rogue animal, it was an organized predator species. The sounds I had heard during that final encounter suggested a complex communication system, different calls that seemed to convey specific information. Commands or warnings passed between pack members during the hunt. The coordination required for the stalking behavior I experienced would need intelligence comparable to human level. They understood tactics, knew how to use terrain to their advantage, could predict human behavior well enough to set up ambushes. This explained why the Deniger couple had been so thoroughly eliminated. A single creature might leave more evidence behind, but a coordinated pack could divide responsibilities, some members handling the actual attack while others cleaned up evidence and eliminated traces. I started researching historical disappearances in the same area, going back through decades of missing persons reports, Park Service records, Native American tribal histories from the region. The patterns were disturbing. People had been vanishing in that section of forest for over 50 years, usually hikers or hunters who had wandered off established trails, always in the most remote areas. Bodies almost never recovered. The official explanations were always the same: bear attacks, falls into ravines, exposure to weather, people getting lost and dying in the wilderness. But when you looked at all the cases together, a different picture emerged. Too many disappearances in too small an area. Too many experienced outdoors people vanishing without a trace. Too many cases where extensive search operations found minimal evidence. Local Native American tribes had legends about that area going back generations. Stories about creatures in the deep forest that hunted humans. Warnings to avoid certain areas during specific seasons. These stories were dismissed as folklore, but the geographic details matched exactly with our investigation area. During my research, I discovered that other agencies had investigated similar cases in different parts of the country. FBI reports that were heavily redacted, military documents that referenced unknown biological entities, National Park Service memos about suppressing information that might cause public panic. There was a pattern of official denial and evidence suppression that went far beyond just my case. Whatever these creatures were, the government had been aware of them for a long time, and they had made a deliberate decision to keep their existence secret. I found references to something called Project Deep Woods in some of the documents I was able to access, a joint operation between multiple agencies to monitor and contain information about unknown species encounters. The project appeared to be ongoing. The scope of the cover-up was massive. Hundreds of cases over decades, thousands of people who had encountered these creatures but were never believed. A systematic effort to maintain the official position that such things didn't exist. From a scientific standpoint, what we were dealing with made sense. A large primate species that had evolved to avoid human contact. Intelligent enough to understand the threat that humans represented. Adapted perfectly for life in deep forest environments. The physical evidence supported the existence of a previously unknown hominid species. The footprints showed clear evolutionary adaptations for forest life. Longer toes for gripping tree branches, increased muscle mass for climbing and strength, proportions optimized for moving through dense vegetation. The intelligence they displayed wasn't beyond the realm of possibility. Great apes show problem-solving abilities and social coordination. A species that had evolved alongside humans would have been under pressure to develop even more sophisticated survival strategies. Their apparent ability to avoid detection made evolutionary sense. Humans have been the dominant predator for thousands of years. Any species sharing the same habitat would need to be extremely good at staying hidden to survive. The official decision to classify these encounters as bear attacks wasn't made lightly. The alternative was too disturbing to consider. If word got out that there were unknown creatures in the forest hunting humans, the panic would be immediate and widespread. Every hiking trail in the region would be closed. Tourism revenue would disappear overnight. Property values near forested areas would collapse. People would demand military intervention. Government resources would be diverted to hunting creatures that might not even be possible to find and eliminate. From a practical standpoint, covering up the truth made sense. The creatures were clearly intelligent enough to avoid detection when they wanted to. Publicizing their existence would only make them more careful, more dangerous, and probably drive them to relocate to areas where they might encounter even more potential victims. The ecological impact of revealing their existence could be catastrophic. Massive hunting expeditions, military operations in pristine wilderness areas, the possible extinction of a species that might be humanity's closest living relative. The ethical implications were staggering. It's been 3 years since I closed my personal investigation into the Denninger case. I transferred to a different state, took a job with a police department that deals mainly with urban crime. No missing hikers, no unexplained forest disappearances, just regular human problems that have regular human solutions. But I still think about what I saw in those woods, the footage of that creature stalking 2 innocent people, the intelligence in its movements, the patience of a predator that knew exactly how the hunt would end. Late at night when I can't sleep, I sometimes wonder how many other cases like this have been covered up over the years. How many missing persons reports have been filed away as bear attacks or hiking accidents when the truth was something far more disturbing. I wonder if the creatures are still living in that remote section of forest, still marking their territory, still waiting for the next group of hikers to wander too far from the main trail, still hunting with the patience and intelligence that makes them the perfect predator. The weight of keeping this secret is enormous, knowing that people are still going into those woods without understanding the real dangers they face, but also understanding why the truth can't be revealed. Some knowledge is too dangerous for public consumption. If you're planning to hike in remote forest areas, please be careful. Stay on marked trails, travel in large groups, carry emergency communication devices. Don't assume that dangerous wildlife means just bears and mountain lions. There are things living in the deep woods that most people never see, things that have learned to avoid human contact when it suits them, but also things that have learned to see humans as potential prey when the opportunity arises. The Denninger couple were experienced hikers who thought they knew how to stay safe in the wilderness. They had maps and supplies and years of hiking experience. None of it mattered when they encountered something that existed outside normal understanding of forest wildlife. Pay attention to your instincts. If something feels wrong in the forest, it probably is. If you feel like you're being watched, trust that feeling. If animals are acting strange or the forest is too quiet, get back to civilization as quickly as possible. Don't investigate unusual sounds or sightings. Don't try to photograph unknown animals. Don't assume that intelligence means communication is possible. These creatures may look human, but they think like predators. Your safety depends on avoiding them entirely. The Denninger family still doesn't know the truth about what happened to their loved ones. They were told it was a bear attack, that the bodies were never recovered because of the terrain and weather conditions. They held memorial services and tried to move on with their lives. Sometimes I think about contacting them, telling them what really happened, giving them closure by explaining that their family members died fighting something that shouldn't exist. But I know it would only cause more pain. The truth wouldn't bring them back. It wouldn't make the grief easier to bear. It would only add fear and confusion to their loss. Some secrets are kept not because the truth isn't important, but because the truth is too harmful to share. I honor their memory by staying quiet, by protecting other families from experiencing the same loss, by making sure the cover-up continues because the alternative is too dangerous to consider. I carry the weight of what I know about the Denninger case every day. 2 good people lost their lives to creatures that officially don't exist. Their families still don't know the truth about what happened. They still hope that someday the bodies will be found and they can have closure. But I know better. Those creatures don't leave evidence behind unless they want to. The Denninger couple disappeared as completely as if they had never existed. The only proof of their final moments was that trail camera footage, and even that has been erased from official records. The forest is a dangerous place, more dangerous than most people realize. What happened to the Denninger couple could happen to anyone who gets too far from civilization, too deep into areas where humans aren't the apex predator anymore. These creatures represent something that challenges our understanding of the natural world. They force us to confront the possibility that we're not alone on this planet, that there are other intelligent species sharing our world, species that see us as prey rather than partners. The implications are staggering. If they exist in Oregon, they probably exist in other places too. Other remote forest areas where they can live without human interference. Other territories marked with claw marks and built with shelters we would never recognize. I pray for the souls of the Denninger couple and hope they found peace. But I also hope that their deaths serve as a warning to others. The woods are full of mysteries. Some of them are better left undiscovered. Stay safe out there, stay on the trails, and remember that in the deep forest you're not always at the top of the food chain. There are things in the darkness between the trees that have been watching us far longer than we've been watching them. If you want to hear more stories like this one, check this.